Good morning, EAC family. We at Sours for Pastors are so grateful for your prayers, your love, and your support, especially during this crisis. At the beginning of 2020, our ministry was really rolling along well. Pastors were signing up for another year of pastor training school, we had just distributed a batch of motorcycles to pastors, and the backpacks had been passed out to all the children for the start of their school year. As you know, Sours for Pastors has had the goal of empowering Honduran pastors and church planters in Western Honduras for the past 15 years. Alan Sours, founder of this ministry, grew up on the mission field as the son of Christian and Missionary Alliance missionaries, and his view of missions was directly influenced by the CMA missions model of working to raise up indigenous pastors and leaders. The focus of our ministry hasn't changed, but the events of 2020 did force us to reprioritize some facets of our work in response to the crisis. When COVID hit Honduras in March, the spread of the virus was mostly contained within the largest cities for the first few months. People throughout the country were confined to their homes and unable to work due to the restrictions put in place by the Honduran government. Those members of the population who live hand to mouth, and this is estimated to be over 95% of the country, were suddenly without any income. The situation quickly worsened into a significant problem of food insecurity and large pockets of actual starvation. Even people in rural mountain villages of western Honduras were affected. Though many of the villagers live on what they can grow themselves, a significant percentage of these families get some financial support from family members who work away from the farm for an income and send money back to family members who still live on the land. That income suddenly ceased. Because our ministry previously included 150 pastor-run feeding centers in the departments of Lempira, Copan, Intibucá, Santa Barbara, Comayagua, Ocotepeque, La Paz, and Cortez, we were already in position to be of assistance from the time the food shortages in Western Honduras started, and we are so grateful to our supporters who were making that possible. However, it became clear that the needs were rising quickly, while at the same time our U.S. food suppliers told us not to expect resupply options to be available for up to a year. During this time, the number of pastors receiving food from Sours for Pastors doubled from 150 to over 300 pastors. Our estimate is that the number of individuals receiving food from our supply at the height of this crisis increased from 14,000 to over 40,000. We implemented a two-pronged response. While we worked with churches in the U.S. to institute new methods of filling and shipping containers of food, our partners in Honduras, the local pastors, were kept very busy locating the families with the greatest need for supplemental food so that we could distribute the food that we had on hand as effectively as possible. The feeding centers could not operate in the normal manner because of restrictions on groups of people gathering, so pastors traveled from house to house handing out food. The annual rainy season starts in mid-May of each year, and that's when Hondurans plant their fields and gardens. As the crops of beans and vegetables began to be harvested in July, more than 4 months after the start of the pandemic, and then corn ripened after that, we began to see a decrease in the amount of supplemental food that was being requested from us. When the Honduran government reduced the restrictions on businesses in September and many individuals were able to return to their jobs, we were encouraged that the worst of the crisis had passed. Unfortunately, although most businesses have reopened, the stressed economic situation has meant that few people have money to spend on anything but the basics, so there is little work and many are being laid off. Plus, the extreme poverty experienced during the growing season meant that most farmers skimped on or entirely neglected the use of fertilizers, and this has resulted in poor harvests this year. Last week, Hurricane Eta blasted through Central America, affecting 1.8 million people. Flooding homes, damaging and destroying many crops, and shattering the infrastructure on the north coast, including many roads, bridges, and factories. While the impact of the storm on our ministry area is far less, there have been somewhere around 6,000 to 8,000 houses in the area where we work that have lost their roof or have been totally destroyed. The majority of farmers are facing a loss of 5 to 10% of their crops, while some have lost 20 or even 40%. Possibly as many as 20,000 people have been pushed back into levels of starvation or food insecurity. Additionally, we know of a number of bridges in our surrounding area that sustained damage or were totally destroyed. The situation is very new, and we are receiving more information daily. Meanwhile, the government is diverting the few resources it has to the areas of the North Coast. Honduras has absolutely not returned to normal. And when you consider that we were already fighting high levels of chronic malnutrition during normal times, you'll understand that we still have a long road to recovery ahead of us. Of course, we are never concerned solely with physical needs. The pastors have used this time of great need to share the great news of God's love with even more people than normal. Sowers for Pastors is blessed to see that the model of working through Indigenous pastors is continuing to transform lives even during a pandemic and a hurricane. When hard times made it difficult for foreign missionaries to travel and work in Honduras, the resources and training that had been poured into the Honduran pastors continued to be used to reach the Honduran people with love, compassionate help, and the gospel. We have stepped out in faith and have committed to purchasing, packing, and shipping 1.7 million nutritionally fortified meals over the next 6 months. A dozen churches in Maryland, Pennsylvania, and Ohio are partnering with us to package the food Sowers for Pastors has purchased. Due to the unavailability of free food from our normal sources, our annual food budget has increased from $32,000 a year to over $130,000. In spite of this increase in overall cost, we are still able to provide meals at less than 5 cents per meal, which means that every dollar donated purchases 20 meals. It has been such a blessing to see the ongoing response of both new and existing supporters, as our ministry has been stretched to meet this onslaught of physical needs. We have been so grateful for your prayers and generous donations during this time. It has also been an exciting time to watch God working for good in a time of hardship and crisis.